Ladies and gentlemen, it is February 26th, 2019, and this is a FAWMtalk. I'm, of course, Juha, and with me, as always, my wonderful co-host, Mr. T.C. Elliott. How is it going?
It is going well.
Fantastic.
How are you?
Well, I'm having cream soda, so it's not all bad.
A special treat.
Exactly. We were talking about this before we started the stream, and T.C. Elliott was you were recommending AW root beer for my taste buds. I was kind of confused because we have this traditional thing in Finland where you kind of make this beer yourself at home, and it's I don't know what it's actually called in English-speaking countries. It's not exactly beer. I don't think it has any alcohol in it, but it kind of like tastes like beer. It's brown and little. Yeah, I don't know what you'd call it. Is it like is it just homebrew?
Probably.
I always thought it was root beer, but because it has the word beer in it, so but it's not. It's not sweet. It's kind of like beer. You typically drink it with food.
Yeah, the root beer here is definitely a carbonated beverage, very sweet. We'd put vanilla ice cream, have root beer floats. It's a really cool little summer treat. Very good.
I see. I gotta try that out. But of course,
Yes,
these things are imported here, so they only sell them at a very, very high price. And I recently found these, I think about a year ago, and I've drank them religiously ever since.
Well, if you like them.
Yeah. I mean, they're kind of starting to get bored of them, but that's me. When I discover something good, I run it down.
Right. Use it till I'm sick of it.
Yeah. With music, if there's one good song, I listen to it every day, over and over for a week until I can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Do we have music? Because I'm pretty sure we should have music. There's some leftovers from yesterday I prepared.
I think we should have music. Whether we do have music is a completely different question.
Well, we could listen to that dog.
Can you hear it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Almost louder than
it's
you.
A story out. Oh, well.
It's not a big deal. I mean, obviously the
I
dog's
could invite him down.
Oh, obviously the dog's a performer too.
Yeah, he's very loud. There's probably a leaf blowing in the front yard, so it'll be a while before he's shutting up.
Yeah, I've been there. Anyway, here's a cool song. This one is called The Event Horizon. It's a song by, let's see here. Oh, Dirkback and Sapien.
event horizon, nothing can escape, not even particles or light. Space-time has compacted. Infinite space-time curvature at the singularity itself, a region the shape of a single point with zero volume. Nothing. How did they come to be in the early universe? Primordial black holes, high energy collision. At the event horizon, nothing can escape, not even particles or light. Space-time has compacted at the event horizon. Nothing can escape. I had moments, but it was pretty rubbish. It's pretty bad, but you know. No, what? Leave it, really. I do.
Right. At the Event Horizon by Dirtbag and Sapiens.
Yeah.
That's one moody track. I like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
It is cool.
Kind of a laid-back groove, especially for Sapient.
Yeah, I'll say.
That's an awesome response.
Whoa. Oh, lordy.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to... did you see on the forum there's a spam account trying to sell sheds, and Sapient posted a link to a song. I haven't heard it yet, so I'm looking forward this evening to listening to Sapient's new song, and I guess a collaboration with a spam account. So
yeah. So
we'll see.
looks like this is the best spam account selling
Ever.
heads.
Yeah.
Yeah, made me
I think
laugh.
I might do something too. Might as well.
Yeah, was it? There was one
Maybe.
already. Who did the spam account song collaboration? I think.
I don't know.
I want to say Billy C, but
On that thread,
yeah, I was looking at
Or
the account
before.
page, and there was
Yeah.
one song there.
yeah, I think it's Billy C has a. I think I looked at it today. It was a lyric post up as a collaboration, and then there's Sapiens. So I might if I have time. I don't know. I'm working on a song that was actually due today for a song fight, but we'll see if I finish it.
All right.
But
Oh boy. Yeah. Well, I've had a very laid back day. Just went to a Greek restaurant, so we had shish kebab. I had multiple shish kebab dishes, and one had I think two shish kebabs, and the other one had four. So I was like, okay, I want the one with four. But then it came at the table, and it was just four, like as advertised. And then there was like a huge salad on the side. I was like, I thought I was gonna have fries, but no, the smaller one had fries. So I just ordered more fries, and I had a huge
course.
plate of meat and a huge plate of salad and a huge plate of fries. And I haven't eaten that much probably since Christmas.
awesome. Yeah, I want fries, so I'm going to eat it all.
Yeah,
I'm going to eat every last French fry.
that's me.
Yeah. I've been trying not to eat as much the last week or so, trying to stay a little strict.
Yeah, that'll be good. I mean, if you're doing it, congrats. It's not easy, at least not for me.
Yeah, so far so good. I need to start. I signed up for a 5K race in mid-April, and I haven't started training for it at all. So
Oh,
it's my Friday, post-FAWM Fridays, that's on the schedule, and I'll have to do a little more intensive startup. Usually I take it nice and easy for a week or two, but I'm going to have to ramp it up in about a week and then get into it, I think. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
so I have a question for you.
Sure.
I was thinking about this, and we have talked about this a little bit, but I was interested in, like, for you personally, how seriously do you take pursuit for some sort of financial gain from your music? Have you ever tried to make any sort of do any sort of stab at the record business?
No. The short answer is no. So, actually, that was something I would have liked to talk with Steven the other night, or
yeah.
last week, or whenever it was, because he actually consistently, I don't think it's a huge amount, but he consistently makes a little bit of money. So he goes through the taxi service, and will write or submit a song he's already recorded to some of the listings, and some of those listings, their sync fees, or they can use in TV, film, adverts, whatever, TV shows, and then the lovely Mary Ellen Kirk runs our local songwriting, NSAI songwriting circle, and she is a touring musician, writes, and so she's the one I mentioned. She had the song, was the theme song for a German wrestling program that just licensed a song of hers, and so she's talked about song libraries where you take music and you put them in libraries, and then people can just browse through the library. If they like something, they pay to use it, and then you get your cut. So it's kind of, there's some libraries that you have to be invited to. And then there's libraries you can just put your stuff on. And she had some advice. There's a few libraries she used and found out that they're not as good for the artist. And then there's some other ones. And there's some that if you don't get any sales, they'll boot you off of it. And then so I've thought about that aspect of it, of trying to make at least a little bit of income. I'm not huge goals or anything. But on the other hand, I'm kind of toying with the idea of free content, a lot of free content. So I really don't know if that's something that I want to put a lot of effort into or not.
Right. Well, my mother always said that if you're good at something, don't do it for free.
Yeah.
I don't know. A lot of people have recommended Taxi from you, but I don't really know that much about that service. I know there's some sort of fee that you have to pay to be part of it. So I never took part of that project. But I mean, what do you know about it? How lucrative do you see it being?
So the way Taxi works, it's a couple of $100 a year. So you've got an upfront cost, and then every submission is like $5, and they only put a price on it so people don't just put dozens and dozens of songs that don't. So it says we want a singer-songwriter song, and you're like, well, this one's kind of like that, but it's got heavy metal guitars on it. That's probably not what they're looking for, right? But if it's free, why not take a chance? So there's a little bit of cost in submissions. And then the Taxi guys, and I forget their names. I'm not a member of Taxi. They've got a free forums that you can go on and actually learn about. It's a good way of seeing and learn. You can learn a lot about what they do. And then there's Taxi TV. I think it's Monday nights, that weekly or monthly or something. So they've got a listing, and the listing says pays up to $30,000 for this, or up to $100 for this, or whatever. And then if you have something that can fit that, or if you want to write something that'll fit it, then you put it as that submission. You pay the extra $5. It goes into that. The two guys or multiple people will go through and kind of shorten the list of the ones they really think will fit. They forward those, and then if it gets forwarded, you get a response. You get a response of some sort saying that it was forwarded, or they liked it but they didn't use it, or they're going to use it, or they didn't like it, but this is why. But there's some sort of feedback there, and I've never been involved with that, so I'm not sure how detailed that is. I have a feeling it's different for each submission. So what I've heard is, and actually I think Helen from chat is doing that this year, or did it the last year, so she'd be a good one to know. But what I've heard typically is, your first year, it's rough because you're kind of learning what they're wanting. And then after the first year, you start getting stuff. And the people that stick with it, that find the value, that they're improving their craft or whatever, even if they're not making a lot of money for the listings or getting a lot of forwards, after they stick with it 3, 4, 5 years, then they start making money. And what I've heard is they can make enough to pay for the taxi service and then a little bit on top of that. And what that little bit is, I don't know if that's $1,000 a year, if it's $10,000 a year, I have no idea. But it tends to, you're kind of learning the ropes of what they want. The cool thing about Taxi is they also do queues. So they'll want 30-second to 2-minute, 3-minute queues that they're going to use it's the bed tracks underneath a scene in a movie, a TV show, or an advertisement, or something like that, which I really think, I don't know how many metal, guitar, hard rock things, and there are a few that they're going to need, right? Yeah. Or how many synth things they're going to need. But some of the stuff you do, and with your orchestral stuff and like that, I've seen people in the GEOS group talk about getting placements with stuff that you could easily do. The thing is, if that's going to be valuable to you personally, is do you want to spend the money, be part of it, go through it, and then do you want to write to order? You know, if they have this submission and they say, we want a singer-songwriter song, something similar to this song, do you want to write something to order, put it in there? Because typically most of us don't have a catalog big enough of stuff you can just say, oh, I've got a song for that. But
yeah, that makes sense. And I don't really like writing to order. So I mostly if I write songs, I just like writing what I like. So just this year on Farm, the stuff that I've done, it's not really commercially viable in any sense of the word.
Well, the cool thing about it is that my understanding is there's enough submissions, like they want enough songs that it's not like you're going to, okay, they put this submission up, I have to write a drum and bass song, or they've got this submission up, I have to write a country song. Right. It's like, you know, you can kind of pick and choose what you want to do. I wonder if, like, and I have no idea, but like for this FAWM, you were like, well, how do I get motivated? Or I've just not really felt like writing songs. I wonder if a service like Taxi or another service that's similar to it, if it says, okay, we want an orchestral piece or something like that, we want a cinematic piece, something like that, that would say, okay, you know, and it kind of gives you an idea of what you want. Like, I feel that's kind of in your wheelhouse, but I don't know if that would be something that would motivate you that you'd want to do. But that would be the motivation for me. If I was in that would be the motivation. Okay, I'm going to take music seriously. This is where I'm going to steer and what I'm going to learn. Whereas right now, it's just, look, I'd like to write a punk rock album. I'm not going to write a punk rock album unless I have the other 5 or 6 ideas. You know what I mean? I've got all these things, but there's no real incentive for me to do it.
Right.
So
that's a real problem. It's just having the incentive, and I think that's part of the reason why I don't like to write that much anymore. And the production side of things seems much more interesting, because that's if you excel at that, then your music has a chance to go places. I find that if production is not on par with the rest of the big boys, then it's kind of rough.
Yeah, I've listened to some of Steven's stuff that he's had placements with, and the thing that I was struck by was it's got a quality to it that's really, it's not the pop polish. It's not that slick production. I don't mean that in a negative way, but it's not the perfect everything, but it sounds good. It's a good production. It's absolutely good, but it's not that thing that I had in my mind that, oh, it has to be this. Yeah. He is able to relatively quickly get a good solid sound, but he goes for that indie rock alternative vibe where that genre, you know, if it's too slick, it no longer sounds like indie rock. Now, if you're doing a country song or something like that, there's going to be an expectation that it's going to be similar to the top 40 or whatever it is they're going for. So, you know, you can't be just garage rocking it and go into it.
Yeah, I think pop music really has, it's grown into this, there's a very robotic quality to the pop tracks that I hear on Spotify these days. And I don't know what it is. It's everything is very quantized, and if you have vocals tracks, everything is pitch corrected like perfectly and timed. I mean, the big record companies, they outsource these things. Like, there are companies that just do vocals. You send them your vocal tracks, and they make everything sound perfect, and then they send just the vocal tracks back. So that because it's a huge undertaking trying to fix those things, and I don't know, like even instruments, drums, everything, they're kind of too on beat to my taste. So
I think there was it might have been one of the Rick Beato videos we were talking about. or it might have been a different one at that same time. But before FAWM started, I was watching a lot of videos about how songs were made, production, Max Martin stuff, and one of the comments that came up a couple of times was, you get to the point where everything is exactly like you said, the drums sound perfect, but you've lost that swing. And like in the 70s, you had these great hits, and the song might speed up. By the end of the song, the tempo had a little bit faster, not noticeably so, but if you immediately started it, you go, oh yeah, it went up 3, 4, 5 beats per minute by the end. And they were talking about how that's not necessarily a bad thing. It also creates energy as the song goes on. By the end of the song, that last chorus is just a hair faster. Yeah. That gives you a sense of, that's a way to have a dynamic in the song, but we've kind of lost that. So I'm a big fan of the Bottle Rockets. This is a Bottle Rockets t-shirt. And one of the singer, Brian, made a comment one time. He said, I miss the really cool out-of-tune vocals. And it's the vocals that aren't perfect. Yeah. They're not perfect, but you can't imagine the song sung any other way. And It's not to the point where you're like, oh, that's a bad note. But it's part of the performance. Like, the performance was so good. Yeah. Where now the note has to be good, and then the performance has to be good. Where before it was kind of the opposite. The performance had to be good, and then you listen to the notes sometimes, I think, and you lose recording a band together. I mean, that is a lost art in a lot of ways in a lot of music now. And that interplay between, when you have the bass and drums locked in and it's not exactly perfect, but they hit it, and sometimes it gets loose and then they come back in, that's another dynamic you've lost.
That's really interesting because back in 2000, when Bruce Dickinson joined Iron Maiden again, they actually started to record albums pretty much live. They rehearse the songs and then they go to a recording space together. I mean, singers in a booth, and they all have headphones and whatever. But they play the song from start to finish and then do some overdubs. And they consciously did it just because they have such a cool energy playing live that they wanted to capture some of that same energy in their studio albums. And I think it, at least back in 2000 when they released Brave New World, I think that was a great sound for the album. And what you said about vocals being out of tune a little bit, or out of tune notes, I think I was listening to some Led Zeppelin albums just recently, and you can clearly hear Robert Plant being kind of out of tune in places, but it sounds like he meant to do it that way. He could have nailed that note, and he just, like, if he wanted to, he could have sang that perfectly, but he chose to do it a little differently. It gives it a little bit of that twang and, like, bluesy, well, I don't know what to call it, but it gives
it's part of the performance.
Right, like you said. And I don't know. I mean, there are arguments for both sides. But
sure,
I guess it's just a trend of things these days. Maybe
I think it's a result of the digital realm of how easy it is, and we've had this conversation in past FAWMtalks about editing, and like Stephen was saying, if he's got a skirmish song, or like you were talking about with a FAWM song, when you're trying to get the demo in and have it done, it's like, why record, 5.5 minutes of music when you can record the intro, the verses, maybe twice, and have a good feel to it, and then just edit it. And then when you're done with the song, come back and say, okay, this part's too long, I'm going to cut, or maybe I want to come back to this part, and you edit it, and you come back and you do this stuff. Well, that also allows you to, like, there's a reason that you didn't have perfectly in pitch vocals in some of the 60s and 70s. It's because how many takes would it take? Right. I mean, how much tape do you have? And when you're limited on your medium and you have limited time, now, like, literally this little Boss BR 900 box I bought in 2006 or 2007 has more processing power than what the Beatles recorded on. You know, it's an 8-track, but there's 8 virtual tracks, so I've got 64 tracks to record on, and it's I can punch in and punch out, and the tape never runs out. You know, it's unreal what you can do now. So the standards have gotten higher, and sometimes you lose something with that ability to fix things. You lose something. It's just,
especially on skirmishers and even on in general with farm songs. I work in a way that if I'm creating something, I consciously create something that all of it can be discarded later. And I did this same thing with NaNoWriMo, where last year I wrote 100,000 words, and it's awful. It's completely horrible. I'm not going to reuse any of it. And there are probably like 100 typos on every page, and I didn't use quotation. Punctuation is like whatever. But I can read it. I can get the gist of it when I'm reading it, so I can rewrite the thing later. And the same applies to farm songs. So when I'm creating something, I just create something really quickly, and it gives me the idea of, okay, this is what the song is meant to be, and then I can recreate it later or re-record things later. And that's the thing with if you create a typical sort of pop song or pop rock song where you have your intro, verse, chorus, record one of each and then copy as many you need. And
the key to that is to record one good quality take of that.
Well, it doesn't matter.
However long that takes.
Like if you can get the gist of the idea across, then it doesn't matter if it's quality.
Well, I would say if you're getting the idea down, you know, as long as you can get the idea across, that's the goal. Mm-hmm. But even in production, even in a song that, let's say you want this one to be released on Spotify, this is the one you're going to try to do some sort of social media marketing for.
Right.
You know, you want that one to be representative. You want it to be good quality.
Right.
Those same tools can be used. It doesn't mean that you have to have one performance from the beginning to the end. Now, are you just going to cut and paste? You know, not necessarily. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, the attention to detail that you're going to focus on that song after, when you're going to make it even better, and you're going to do that. Like, some of these tools are still just as viable when you're spending a week solid on one song as opposed to 2 hours solid on one song.
Absolutely. And I don't think many professional acts or what, if you have a good pop act and you put them in a studio and they keep recording stuff and backing tracks and vocals and whatever, I think a lot of it's gonna just get sampled and repeated and copy pasted on the tracks, and it gives it that sort of, I don't even know what to call it. It gives it that robotic sort of feel, which people seem to like these days.
I think so. When I was first, maybe not first, but when I was in Songfight and I was doing a song, and I had a drum loop. So I used back then I was using Easy Drummer 2, and I did the drum loop. And one of the comments on one of the songs, and it's absolutely correct, was, well, the drums just sounded the same throughout the whole. You know, so every verse was almost identical. Like, I got intro, verse, chorus, and I just repeated the intro for the bridge, you know. And so it was literally basically 3 loops repeated through a 4-minute song, 3.5-minute song. And so what you miss, even if it's a professional production that you hear on the radio, sometimes what you miss is that missed hi-hat, that one that you missed. Most people don't hear it, like, you don't notice it, but it's part of it. There was something there. One of the things back when MIDI was the big deal and the samples were much worse, you know, they said, you know, you can use MIDI and you can make drums and you can do these things, but it's going to be obviously fake. But one of the things you can do is add a shaker, or add a tambourine, or add something that's a real instrument along with it. And it helped. Did it make it sound like real drums? No, of course not. But it gave it that live, So all the same problems that I say problems, but some like watching how Max Martin and them put together a pop hit, and you see exactly what they did. It's not a performance beginning to end. Even the vocalist, not a performance beginning to end. It is very much a production where they're taking parts and putting it together and switching things around, and you can see exactly what they did and what they called back and all these things. That's not only viable. That's an awesome way of doing it. It's not for everybody, but that recording as a band is also not a bad way of doing it. And I think depending on the style of music, there's lots of pluses and minuses. I'm not sure how many pop acts, when you're thinking of just a Katy Perry song that's coming on the radio, how much of that has to be a performance to go through and still be a really good song or a well-liked song. So I think that I think we can learn, I guess, from both, and keep in mind that, sometimes, I can't remember who I was reading about, but they said, I always leave one mistake in every song. Right. And you probably won't hear it, but I always leave one mistake in it. And I'm like, well, why do you do that? And the comment was something to the point to keep me real, to keep me grounded, to let me know that I'm still a musician. I'm not perfect. It'll never be perfect. And it's like, it's okay for something not to be perfect. Sometimes those mistakes are the best part of the song, or it gives you a feel that you wouldn't have otherwise. But there's no wrong way of producing.
That is really
absolutely no wrong way.
I don't know if it was Bento or Recording Revolution or one of those channels where I was watching a video where they were giving out these production tips or arrangement tips or whatever, and they say that if you have like two verses, you have to make them different somehow. Like maybe change the feel for the drums, or change the way the guitar is playing the rhythm, or something. Just change something, and people won't tune to the other station when the second verse comes up. So I think that's very interesting. I started to listen to a lot of pop songs with that in mind, and it is true. Even in cases where I'm more concentrated on maybe the lead vocalist or whatever, it sounds like, okay, this is one verse, then comes the chorus, and then there's another verse it's just the same thing again. But it isn't. It's when you really start to listen to it, the second verse is oftentimes a lot different than the first verse. It has the same sort of structure, and maybe the vocals melody is the same, or it's as long as the first one, but there are cases when the rhythm guitar changes from like ding 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 to like straight rhythm to some sort of reggae feel, like, or I don't know. It's weird how much they change things, and it just like I never noticed that until just recently.
Yeah, in some of the song I was doing this last fall, I've got a little ukulele. It's nylon string guitar tuned to A, so it's just a shorter neck. And I really like that thing, but I basically just use it for like a typical arrangement would be acoustic guitar with bass and drums, and then electric guitar underneath it. Just you probably won't hear it at all or barely in headphones in the first verse, the electric guitar, and then the second verse maybe you'll hear it more. But then I would add that ukulele in there too, just as another element that's up a little bit higher in pitch, and go along with it. And then the chorus, you'll hear more of the guitars, and they're panned a little more. I'll have 2 tracks instead of 1. Right. And so those little things, it's like, it's not even changing how you're playing. It's just how much of the guitar, where the guitars are in the space in your mix, even how the EQ works sometimes, where because I added that ukulele on top, and I had a little bit of electric guitar that was hitting those mids really good, where the acoustic is. So the EQ would change for the second verse because they had to fit more instruments and they were spread. Something as simple as that will give a sense of dynamic change and interest, even though the average listener that they're listening to this, if they're at best going to go, oh, there's another instrument. And sometimes they won't even notice that because, like with that Gitalele, I would do nothing on the first verse. The second verse would just be an arpeggio, and then if there was a bridge or something, it might be just that and the acoustic. And so you wouldn't even hear it as an instrument. And it's like I've heard a lot of, I'm terrible at synth pads, but I've heard a lot of synth pads will come in and be a layer in rock music or in pop music. And I'm terrible at that, but it's doing the same thing. You're just adding a sound or a texture or something that may not even be distinct. Like you may not even be able to identify it out of the mix.
There's a little bit of a danger, of course, there. If you start adding too much stuff, then you have to be like a EQ guru to be able to make some sense of that mess. But it can work.
Yeah.
But my point was more that if you can really get away with a ridiculous amount of change, and people, I would argue that most listeners won't notice. I mean, you could just take some sort of fast hard rock song where it got like verse chorus, like just straight chords, and then you change chord and it's the same. But when you go to the second verse, it can be the same idea with the lead vocals or whatever, but the guitars could be playing like like just one note and going around the guitar, and people won't notice. It just sounds like interesting or refreshing for some reason.
Yeah, and sometimes people, oh, that's cool. What's cool? The second verse was cool, and they, most. If you think about it, we deal with musicians or songwriters, or lyricists even that listen to music over and over again and try to do that. But the average listener, whether they play an instrument a little bit or not, they're not listen. They don't. Like I guess what I'm saying is, like, I've ruined songs for my wife because it'll come on the radio. I'm like, and I'm like pointing something out. I'm like, I hate that, and then she's like, "What are you talking about?" Like that right there. Can't you hear that? She goes, "He's singing the second verse, or it's the chorus." I'm like, no, can't you hear? And like Toby Keith's vibrato, I love Toby Keith, but his vibrato, it sounds like a machine gun. It's awful. Willie Nelson's phrasing is always off time, and he's done it his entire career, and it's cool, and most people don't notice it. And I ruined Willie Nelson for my wife because it's not. She goes, "Oh, he's doing it wrong." No, he's doing it exactly right, but it's different. And you pull these things out and you tell somebody about him, and then all of a sudden they focus on it, and and she's just so I can't talk. So if I say, "Oh, I like that," or I like, "Oh, that was cool," and she's like, "What?" I'm like, "I don't want to tell you. It was just really cool what they did right there," because she'll start listening to an element, and then the song no longer is as cool with her. And it's amazing how many times, just whether it's rock or pop or whatever, that I'll be listening at the bass line and how it changes. And that, when you start off with longer notes and then you go to a little bit faster rhythm, not super fast, just a little bit faster, it creates energy. Right. And I think it's important too, like even what I was doing is, the Recording Revolution was one of those places where it said, or maybe it was one of the other places, but one of those things said, if you want something to stand out, if you want the chorus to be really popping, then make the thing that comes before it less, have a contrast. So if you have a pre-chorus, so you got the verse and it's going along, you have a pre-chorus of whatever kind, get it to die off or have it a lot less instruments, and then when you hit the chorus, it may not be any louder than the verse, but it sounds like it because what came before it. So that dynamic, it doesn't matter how you do it, how many instruments, it doesn't matter how, but if you have dynamics in your recordings, it's going to be more interesting.
It all comes back to it all comes back to what we talked earlier about contrast. Like if you want something to be big, make the other thing smaller. And a lot of really energetic rock songs, they just have a little pause before the chorus. So they're playing there's a pause, and then the chorus comes on. And it sounds massive as a result. And like we were talking about the tempo, and one of the things you can do with your DAW these days is that if you want to an energetic track, I mean, of course, it doesn't work with everything, but if you want your track to have a sense of growing energy, an easy thing to do is just like if your song starts at 140 beats per minute, then make the song end at 150 and just have it grow gradually throughout the song.
Each section.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's. The very first song I did for Song Fight was called Back to Juvie, and it was just an acoustic guitar and my vocal, and the vocal wasn't great. And one of the negative comments I got from it was one of the guys said, so I listened to your song, and then I listened again and I looped it so I could listen, and the ending is definitely faster than the beginning.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a song, it's a revenge song about the singer was sent to juvie over something and they're going to get you back. And it's like it's frenetic. It should be faster. It should be like I was like, and I didn't respond. I was brand new to the site, and it was just a guy and guitar song in the middle of all these produced, songs. It wasn't going to get a lot of votes anyway. But I was just thinking to myself, I was like, how is that a negative? like I don't understand how. Like, I understand if it started at a speed and went to a different speed and then to a different speed. But if by the end, if that last chorus, if you're 8-10 beats per minute faster than when you started. Now, I have had at the same time, I have a song that I shared, and the first part of the first verse, so it's kind of a verse that has the same chord structure twice, and the first part was a little slower, and then I sped up right there, and then it stayed the same for the rest of the song, and that's not very good. That's yeah. So
right.
But
you can't please everyone. Everyone has their own listening habits. So you just have to.
I like the idea of doing something and purposefully excluding somebody. Like, I'm going to do, I'm going to do this type of music. And if you decide, so if I'm doing hard rock, there's a lot of people that aren't going to like it. You're already excluding them, right? And then if you do something, add a little dissonance, you're excluding a lot more. If you're experimenting in things that aren't normal.
I think a better way to approach this is start from zero and start including people.
So I guess the reason I make that comment is so it's in reaction to, I want everybody to like this song.
Yeah, that's not good.
Right? Yeah. So that's impossible. So you're set, if you have that, and I was kind of guilty of that. Oh, I've got this thing. Everybody, and it's the assumption you make. Oh, all my friends, my family, everybody listen to this. It's a good, I'm really proud of this song. And then the first time somebody comes and says, it's all right. And you're like, you're not crushed yet, but you're like kind of taking it. It's like burning your finger on that match. You haven't been burned, but you've felt what it's going to feel like. And then, it's like purposefully aim for your.
It doesn't even have to be your own song. if you have a music, if you have songs that you really love from some other band, and you go like this, how can anyone not like these? And you go share them with your friends, and they're like, I didn't really care for it. It's soul crushing. Yeah. But that's another thing. Like you were talking about ruining songs for other people. And that's why I try to, whenever I catch myself, I try not to criticize movies or whatever, because when somebody I tell somebody that I'm gonna go see this movie today or tomorrow, and they're like, oh, it was really awful or something, and it really wasn't as good as the first one. Some sort of comment like that, it ruins the movie for me, because then I'm gonna go into the movie with the expectation that it's gonna be, and then I just start watching it oh, this is not gonna be as good, and it ruins the movie for me. And so I try not to tell
And
anyone
fail.
my opinions about anything. I can say that it was really great, but I try not to criticize stuff because it's criticizing something. I kind of count those as spoilers these days, and
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. I do, and yeah, I guess. So when I was in a long time ago, when the Offspring had their album Smash come out, which would have been '93, maybe '92.
right.
So my roommate at the time loved this album, like loved it. And it was on cassette, I think. And so he had this little Escort Sport with the little spoiler on the back, and it was still a Ford Escort, but it had the little spoiler in the back. And we'd be tooling around, cruising, and not really cruising, but we'd head over to a friend's house that lived out of town and stuff. And he had this, if we went to the laundromat, Smash was on this thing. Offspring was in the tape player. And he played, and it automatically flip and turn direction and listen to the other side. And he was like this. And I didn't like it. I'll be honest with you. He played it. I was like, this is obnoxious. And of course he had it too loud. You couldn't even have a conversation or hear anything that was going on. Right. It was awful. It was absolutely terrible. And after about the 15th time I've heard this thing over the course of a week and a half, right? I was like, well, that one song was pretty cool. You know, I can see why he would like that. And then by the time he moved out of the apartment and a year and a half later, I'm like missing this album. So it took me forever. And to this day, like when I was telling you I might be running, I've got signed up for a 5K, I have to start training. That's one of the albums I'm going to put on and listen to in my earphones because it's got that energy. And I love that album. But it took like when we first listened to it, his first impression was this is great, and my first impression was it's all right. You know, I hear some good stuff in there, but it's not really something I'm going to listen to. Right. But because it was kind of force fed on me, it ended up being something that I really, really like, and I feel it. And I think sometimes that's happened to me where I've had, even earlier than that when I was back home, I got a cassette, and I was like, a brand new cassette. I spent money on this cassette. I put it in the thing, and I was like, I don't know if I particularly care for this. And then because I spent money on it, I put it back in a week later, and I don't know. And by the third time, I'm like, oh, this isn't too bad. And I remember thinking that of Van Halen's OU812. I did not like that the first time I listened to it. But by the time, and I still don't listen to it to this day, but it got to the point where I actually enjoyed the album. It wasn't, and if I put it on now, it'd probably bring up the memories from when I first had it. Right. So I think there is something about audience and expectations and being okay. Like if somebody doesn't like your stuff, that's not a bad thing necessarily. Or if somebody doesn't like the same song as you do, that's not a bad thing necessarily. But we get so emotionally attached to songs we like and to our own creations, which rightfully so, that any hint of somebody not appreciating it can be a debilitating blow in some cases. Where
that is really interesting to hear that experience from you, because with me and my girlfriend, because she's a lot better person than I am. We typically listen to music that I like. So I have Spotify open on my computer. I have the speakers, so it's typically my music playing. And she's like, well, I like it well enough, so it doesn't matter. But I think I turned her to Megadeth and bands like that. She didn't like them at all, and eventually now she can't get enough of like Megadeth or those type of bands. Yeah. But one fateful year, I don't know, Nightwish. There was this Finnish band called Nightwish. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. It's like symphonic metal. They released their last album. I think it was the last album. They released an album like every 5-6 years. And the last album was really, really good. When it was released, I immediately bought the CD. I listened to it probably like 2 weeks in a row. And she was getting sick of it. But she didn't say anything because, again, she's a better person than I am. But she would complain to her friends, and they were like, "What are you thinking? Just tell them to stop." But she didn't say a word, and eventually, like with everything, I eventually get bored of it and then start listening to other stuff. But that was a great album, and I really enjoyed listening to it.
Well, that's funny. You know, my wife and I have influenced each other quite a bit in listening experiences. So I never listen to country music, top 40 country music, and my wife likes, not all of it by any stretch, but she listens to top 40 country radio, and that's typically, she has music that she'll put on, but that's kind of her go-to. And I actually kind of like that. I don't listen to the radio at all anymore. Over the last couple of years, I've gotten out of the habit. I got a motorcycle 2-3 years ago, and there's no radio on it, and I will never have a radio on my motorcycle. I think that's sacrilegious. So I'm out of the habit, and when I do listen to, like, I've been driving my truck this winter, and it's on sports talk, you know, which is just as bad as anything else. So I'm not exposed to any type of popular current music other than YouTube, and I even rarely listen to Spotify. But I've got an appreciation, and there are artists that she listens to that there are songs that I like a lot that I never would have heard otherwise. And the same thing with her. When we first met, I was still pretty hard into blues, more blues rock at that point. So when I first started playing guitar, it was all blues all the time. Played my acoustic, electric, whatever, and that's basically all I did, all I listened to, that and classic rock. And then I got into blues rock, and then I got into some other stuff. And I've always had a wide range, but on the instrument, that was really where I focused. And there's blues albums that she likes, and blues artists that we listen to, and blues rock and stuff that she had never even. She hated the Bottle Rockets. We loved going to see the Bottle Rockets, and I was playing it a lot, playing their music all the time, and she was like, "What is this stuff?" You know, and she was doing the same thing. She was putting up with it. Every once in a while, she was like, "Okay, you've heard enough of that. Let's listen to something else." But she was polite about it. You know, she was nice about it. Right. And then I took her to a show. She goes, "Okay, I'll go with you." And she tells the story now. She goes, "You know, I was like, I'll go, but I'm not going to like it. You know, I'm going to have to sit through this. But, you know, something he likes, so I'll go, whatever." And at the end of the show, she was like, "You know, this was cool. It's not maybe the music I would automatically go to or normally listen to, but it was a really good show." Yeah. And then that eventually, over the course of the last 15 years or so, she's as big a Bottle Rockets fan, and maybe a bigger Bottle Rockets fan than I am. You know, to the point where we walk in and all the members know us by name. We talk to them. You know, it's just one of those really cool things. You know, we'll travel to the last couple of times we went to Madison, Wisconsin, and saw some farmers like Nancy and John, and I met Teresa J up there, and that was because the Bottle Rockets up there. So we drove 6.5 hours up there, saw the show, got to have dinner and meet, you know, see people that we've only met a few times, and then come back, and we made it all around this band. And it's over a band that she did not like when she first started listening to it. So I think there's a lot. I think mindset goes a lot into whether I like a song. And there have been times when I've wanted to listen to music on FAWM, and I've started listening to it. I'm like, all right, that's all right. And you know, and I realize, okay, that's a good song. There was nothing wrong with that song. It was a good song, but my reaction to it was because of where I'm at. It's not had anything to do with it. And if I go back and listen to that same song the next day or after I've gotten something to eat or in a different frame of mind, so I literally there are songs that I did not like, and then if I re-listen to them, I'm like, why didn't I like this song? This is a great song from my headspace.
I know what you mean. I really, if I'm angry, I skip a lot of songs. That's one of the more prominent examples. But country music is weird. I really never considered it as because there are some awful country songs that I really don't like. I'm not going to give you any examples, but I really got, the more I started to listen to like new releases, new music, I really got into country music too. And there are artists like Josh Turner really, really great album, the last one. And there was recently a single. Yeah, there we go. Brad Paisley. And he's got this new single called Bucked Off. I really like that one. Cool
I haven't
song.
heard that yet. Yeah.
But Pearl was talking about compression in the chat room. And I don't know, I've been doing a little bit of that EDM music, and you really have to love sidechaining and compression when you're doing EDM.
Yeah.
And when I've got some sort of like massive pad sound playing like in the background, I just sidechain the ever living whatever out of it, and it's not like it's like, and then you put kick to it, and and it's incredible what it can do with compression. It's just I love it.
That was one of the discussions that was on FAWM early on when I first started. I'd say probably second, third year, when I first started getting into mixing stuff and actually trying to, start learning. And it was like, oh, compression's evil. Oh, no, you have to have compression. And it was, literally, there were people who was like, I'm not using compression anymore. And eventually I realized why that conversation was taking place and why there were people on these extremes. And it's because, and to this day, I'm terrible. I can use compression lightly and have good results. And I still haven't mastered it by any stretch. But because there's ways to do it musically, and there's ways that recordingrevolution.com or that YouTube said, that was a really good site for me, because he's like, look, I'm taking this vocal, I'm going to put this compressor on it, this is what I'm doing, don't worry about the settings, this is what I'm trying to do. And he just evened out the performance. Yeah. And there's no clue that there's if you listen to it, there's nothing to give away that there's compression other than the quiet words are a little louder, a little more even to the louder words, and you can hear it. And I noticed on a couple of albums that came out that there were words that I couldn't hear, and they didn't use compression. And I'm like, why didn't they use compression on that and make it so that when I'm listening in my car to the CD, I can hear this and professionally released stuff. And it's like compression can be a good tool, or it's like any other tool. It can be used differently. And that side chaining, that woof woof woof, is a bad, quote unquote, bad use. You're squashing the crap out of it. It's terrible, but it's used musically. And if you gate it and then put it on the kick so that it's just right then, that sound, everybody knows that sound. And if you've ever been in the club, when that comes on and it's like this, like there is no denying the effect. That is an awesome experience to have. And I remember the first time I went to the dance club, because that's not something I would normally do. Go to the dance club and I'm hearing this music and I'm like, what is going on with this stuff? Back when raves were new and big, and I'm dating myself now, I think. So, but yeah.
You gotta date yourself every once in a while.
Nobody else will date me.
The compression, it's a very much like a professional tool, because you have to know how to use it, and if you don't know how to use it, it very easily just end up hurting yourself. So it takes a little bit of learning the dials, what everything does, and because it's literally what you describe. It's compressing stuff. If you have a waveform that's going like this, it's taking the peaks and compressing it down so that everything can sound more even. But even in those cases, you can't really, if you have really like wide range of vocals, you can't really make it sound all even. You have to use some sort of volume automation to make everything sound more even, but compression definitely helps. What else would sidechain be useful for with compression apart from EDM? It's Wobby asking it. And sidechaining is because in music in general, or let's say contemporary music, the beat is the important part, because if you don't have a really clear beat in your music, if you can't hear the kick drum and the snare drum really clearly, if everything else is modding them down, then you don't have that sort of energy or pulse to your music. It really dies out, and I was really bad at this for the longest time. I kind of still am, but even in rock tracks, pop tracks, I would say even in probably folk tracks, you can just use sidechaining and have the kick drum pop out from the track more. There's nothing wrong with doing that. It's just you're opening some space so that the listener can hear the kick more easily, because the kick really is the important part in many of those tracks where you have some sort of energetic beat and you have to hear that doom, doom, and if that dies out, if the bass guitar is drowning that out, if the vocals or some pad, or when you start piling these different sounds on top of the kick drum, if it dies out, if you can't hear it, it starts to sound kind of dead. There's it's just muffled.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's one of those rabbit holes, I think. It's getting into mixing, and
yeah, definitely.
I remember so there's I mean, something as simple as using the EQ and figuring out how to use that. I still feel like I'm a beginner with EQ in a lot of ways, because the effects, and something I've learned or something that I've been told and have finally internalized, is that most of the mixing moves that I make that are good mixing moves are very subtle. So it's the accumulation or the totality of what I do that makes the track better, as opposed to one move that there is no miracle move. Now that's sometimes not true when you're fixing a glaring frequency or something, but typically it's the compression combined with the EQ combined with the reverb on the vocal. And the best advice I ever got, somebody was like, well, how much reverb should I use? And they said, all right, so you put your reverb on, you get a good reverb, you put it on till you can hear it, right? And then you back it off just a hair.
Right. Yes.
And then that's where you start, and then that's when you start learning reverb. Well, I haven't really learned reverb after that. So, but that light hand, so don't have a heavy hand, has really paid off, where when I have a mix that somebody compliments, like, hey, this sounds really good, it's usually a lot of small touches as opposed to something that I've oh, this is great.
But there needs to be a goal to the process. So how to approach a mixing process is, because it literally is, you have these sonical elements and you try to mix them together. And I read a piece where mixing a metal track was described, and it says that it's like trying to fit a bus load of people into a phone booth, and that's pretty much like mixing, and in any way possible. And
yeah,
when you start mixing a track, the first thing I do is gain staging, and then I try to even everything out so that I can hear everything. So I just fiddle with the volume knob as long as it takes to get a sound where or if I turn the volume down to just like a quiet volume, that I can hear everything. I can hear the kick drum, I can hear the guitars, I can hear the vocals, I can hear the bass. So those are the important things. And then when I'm at a spot where I can hear everything, then I just listen. What don't I like in this? And I just keep listening. Like if I can't pinpoint anything, then it's good. There's nothing you have to do about it. But if there's something that you don't like, then you try to figure out how to fix that one thing. And if there are multiple things, you just pick one, fix that, pick another one, fix that. and just do little small changes to fix the overall picture. And that's like that's mixing for me.
Yeah, and the complex part is when you make one change and to one thing, you're like, okay, and then it affects everything else, and it's like, so because sometimes fixing something is, you're like, oh, I can't hear the guitar, right? So what are you doing? You're EQing some other instrument to make space for it. You don't necessarily go to the guitar, or you take that guitar and you cut a frequency that's not using and very mildly accentuate another part of it, and then do that with, say, the other guitar and the other track, so that it really sounds stereo. And it's so the complex part is like, it's not always this guitar needs to be louder, or I can't hear it. It's not always turn it up. And as a matter of fact, I would say more often than not, it's don't turn it up. That's the worst thing you can do. You know, and so something that I do. I use. Have you ever used the pink noise method of setting your levels?
No, it's a little bit too much of a process. I just use my ears.
Yeah, and it depends on how many tracks you have. Right. But what I found is if I do that, my gain staging comes out every time. If I don't do that, I have issues. But there's also something else. And maybe minor issues, but I usually have an issue. It almost always comes out too hot. But something else I found is when a lot of times I have a lot of tracks, and most of my songs don't have, by the time I'm done, there may be a lot of little tracks, like little bits of backup vocal or sections, but it's a manageable number of tracks. It's not a huge number of tracks, but I'll just take all of the faders and I'll just highlight them all and just move them all down a dB or 2 dB. And look, I've got more headroom, and then I'll go back to what I'm doing. Oh, it got up again. But that's a kind of a poor man's.
No. That's
and that's after. And that's after balancing. You have to balance one way or the other. So
no, but that's exactly what you need to do. And I would argue that when you know that you always have to do that, then you start by lowering them way down.
Yep.
And
you would think.
Yeah. Kind of start. If you don't do it yet, then you haven't done it for long enough. So it's. But that's exactly right. That's what you have to do. You create headroom by lowering everything there.
Another trick is I'll increase the volume of my monitors before I start mixing. So when I balance that, and then I'll turn it back down, and that way I'm not trying to get the track volumes in my DAW to be the proper level out here. So I purposely go up another 5 decibels or 10 decibels up on that, so that when I mix it, and then when I take it back down, I have this headroom. So changing the volume that I'm listening back, not in the DAW, but just higher or lower, louder and quieter, just that gives me a different perspective, and sometimes I'll hear something new in the mix.
These days, what I typically try to do is I just look at the let's see. Yeah, I just try to look at the. Is it called RMS meter?
RMS, yeah.
Like when you have those little bars jumping up and down when you're playing the track. I just try to see if they're around -16, -12, around that area. That's typically good enough. And when I'm mixing, when I'm listening to, is everything equally loud? I do what I just described. I take my typical listening level, how I listen to music, and then I turn it around 50%, and then it's pretty quiet. It gets kind of hard to hear everything, but if you can hear everything, then it's typically pretty good. And if nothing is jumping all over the place.
Yeah. So that's cool.
Definitely. And what you said about like trying to figure out what you need to do to fix some problem, it is a little bit of an art. Like you have multiple different ways you can solve a problem, and you just gotta try them all. And once you start to gain more experience, then you already know, well, if I do this thing, then I'm gonna have problem with that thing later on. So maybe I'll just try this other thing that I know is going to work.
Yeah, you called it an art. It's definitely an art. I think it's a dark art. It's a, it's a, there's a.
Well, it requires the use of your ears, and that's like the problem is that when you mix for like an hour, then you're doing more damage than you actually fiction. Mm-hmm. So that gives it a little bit of that dark art quality because you don't notice that. You keep mixing and it's been 30 minutes and you keep mixing and you're starting to do damage and you don't know why it sounds bad at the end of this session.
Yeah. I love and I don't do it enough, but I love when I get to a point and it's like, okay, this isn't bad, I need to tweak it, and then that's when it usually goes terrible, and I just save a new session, and I have a whole, another one, and then I can do whatever I want, and then go back and listen to the original session. Is this really better? And a lot of times that extra hour and a half that I just spent doing all these moves, and it's like, well, the arrangement might have got a little bit better because I did something, but the track doesn't sound any better at all. So I'll just go and I'm like, okay, I'll rearrange this and we'll call it good. And I'm also not, I've got very little stuff that I'm releasing. It's just for a song fight or stuff like that. So, I give myself permission to make it sound good and not ever have to make it perfect. And perfection is the enemy of completion, but everybody wants their stuff to sound as good as possible. So,
well, I think there's a point. Like you have to have some sort of perspective about this thing. Like if you, it's good idea. It's a good idea to aim to perfection, but you have to know when to stop.
Yep.
So if you never try to perfect something, then you don't know. Like you always go to like the 75% mark, then you know how to get there, but you never know how to get to the end point. So you need a little bit of experience from that area too.
Yeah, there's a saying: a person will never reach their full potential if they're never asked to do more than they can.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. It's just, another way to put it is that you just always have to find ways to get a little bit outside of your comfort zone. So if you don't...
I'd agree with that.
If you feel like you don't know what you're doing, then you're in the right spot. All right. Well, I think we gotta play some music, man. Maybe we continue from this... on Thursday, so
okay.
Let's see what we got here.
Maybe.
Oh, we got a cool song here by Zekoop and Carlos. How do you pronounce that name? Zekoop. Zekoop.
That's exactly right.
All right.
Zekoop.
Zekoop. So this one's called "Embarrassed Eyes." So until Thursday, everyone. I'll see you around.
Later.
So do you want it tough? Just when you've had enough. So you choose to be anything to stop me. And do I want it tough? Let go and feel the rough. Why don't you leave me so you can be free? Over the worst, it's all you can do. See the light that shines above you. I wanted myself see, accept all that you can be. Get in the moody blue.